Originally released on the DMG Game Boy in Europe only at some point in 1997, what was the third in the Smurf series gets its due re-release on the Color console. Reissuing older Game Boy games definitely does sometimes have a feel of laziness about it, but I actually prefer to take each one on its own merit. There's a couple of qualifiers I have that determine whether I'm okay with a re-release. A, was the game good enough to warrant it in the first place, and B, has enough been done to it to bring it up to date with the new console. As we saw in the previous review, things like the deplorable Rugrats Movie fail on both counts, so trying to come up with any other reason for the re-release other than cash grab is not really possible. However, on the first point, this time, the Smurfs Nightmare was certainly the best of the three Smurfs games the DMG had, and it was region exclusive too, so this was actually the first time anywhere in the world got the game outside of Europe. As for the second point, well, let's have a look. I am encouraged by the fact that the product code is CGB here, rather than DMG, and the game is housed inside a clear cartridge rather than a black one. That indicates the game only works in the newer console and is not backwards compatible, which was usually done to fully utilize the extra GBC capabilities without having to accommodate the old Game Boy. As a side note, unless I've missed something when collating my chronological list, let me know in the comments if I have, this is the first Game Boy Color game to be released with a CGB product code, and therefore the first Game Boy Color only game, so I have cautiously high hopes about an improvement. Gargamel is gonna cast an evil spell on the Smurf village. All the sleeping Smurfs, why isn't it Smurfs, by the way, are trapped inside horrible nightmares. You need to go into their houses and rescue them. This is another Smurf-based platformer, but rather than be like the two that came before it, this one takes a much more inventive approach than the Smurfs Travel the World or the first one. Your overworld is the slumbering Smurf village, and you can walk about it freely, trying out doors, reading signposts, and interacting with the animal characters you see there. The houses, and even a well, represent the levels, but unfortunately all the doors are locked, and the rope leading down the well is missing. The mole can't help you because he's lost his glasses, and the rabbit won't help you unless you find him a carrot. So what do? There's a key somewhere in the village, it's not hard to find, that'll let you into Greedy Smurf's house. This unlocks the first pair of levels. Each Smurf is having a nightmare about something different, and so each of the stages is unique to that particular house. Greedy's haunted by visions of a true Hell's Kitchen. The foodstuffs have come alive and demonic chefs hurl dinner plates at him. You need to find your way through these excellently laid out levels to reach the end goal. On the first level of a pair, you'll usually be able to find an item that'll help you later on. On the second level, you'll need to fight a boss at the end instead. In the kitchen, you'll eventually find a carrot. Once you get back to the village, give it to the rabbit and he'll take you to his minigame, an auto-scroller where you ride on his back, jumping when you need to. Get to the end and you'll find another key. This opens the second house, which is a haunted house theme. Here you'll find a rope, which lets you into the well, and so on it goes. I really love that the levels are all interconnected. It gives a real sense of adventure and purpose as to why you're visiting all these stages. Sure, it is purely a prettier way of describing a linear path, but many games simply didn't bother to justify why one level is a kitchen or another a haunted house. B is your jump button, but it doesn't really matter here because A doesn't do anything anyway. There are these sarsaparilla leaves that you can see all over the place. You might notice that when you collect them, this gauge in the bottom right ticks up. There are 3 chunks to this gauge. If you manage to fill one, you can do a higher jump. You have to jump twice in succession to get it to work, which can help you reach other areas that are just out of reach otherwise. Fill 2 sections up and you can add a 3rd jump to that, which is even higher and does a flip. You're not obligated to collect all of these, but you'll get bonus points at the end, which can lead to extra lives. Smurfs Nightmare isn't as tricky a platformer as the second one was, and it's much more interesting than either of the first two. The settings constantly change, and they all look lovely. The game is split up with these mini-levels which keep it fresh. You'll get the notable Smurfs theme song over the intro, of course, but then other than that, the soundtrack is an absolute banger with some rarely heard instrumentation and samples being used. So back to the reissue topic. Does the colorized version do enough stuff to justify being put out again? To be honest, the graphics were already pretty accomplished. By 1997, you're justified in expecting no less, but some nice foreground additions and parallax scrolling definitely adds to the effect. As to why it's a CGB rather than a DMG, could be something as simple as the number of colors on screen at once, but as we'll see later, the game definitely does not push the color console a great deal. It It might be fairly simple compared to some other things, but even so, it does look rather lovely. Ultimately, opening up such a fun platformer to more of the world means I don't have any problems with the re-release on this one.